Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone that's joining this live streaming today. My name is Felipe and I'll be your host today. And today especially we're bringing some people here from the United States, Tony Gallardo, Daniel Saldivar, Julian Lopez, and Gabriel Spalding to talk to us about business basically. These guys have companies, they have hired, some of them are in a bigger position than others, and we're going to be talking all about this whole process of bringing in a producer and so on and so forth, and how this can help your business. So if you have any questions, of course, don't forget to just send to us. We're going to be reading them live here and getting them to reply to you. And let's go and start the introductions. First of all, we have with us Tony Gallardo. Hey, Tony, how are you?
Good, Felipe. How are you doing, sir?
Absolutely fantastic. Can you tell our audience a little bit about you and what your company does, and just so we get to know you a little bit better?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having myself and everyone here on today. I appreciate it. Yeah, I have a little boutique studio here in South Texas, in San Antonio, and we do commercials, corporate videos, advertisements, so 30-second, 40-second, 90-second types of spots and ads that run on TV, on the web, Facebook, Snapchat, you name it. So from widescreen to vertical, that's what we do. So a little bit of live action, some animation, editorial, a little bit of everything.
Excellent. So let's take a look a little bit about on the works that Tomiga has done. And I'm going to play for you guys just a short clip for you. Let's check it out.
Welcome to Santigos. Every purchase you make goes right back into our community. Our community, even snacks. Santigos is committed to investing in our youth, finding the next cure, and helping out our senior citizens. Together, we make the difference. So thank you. Thank you for helping make our community better. Santigos Entertainment. Be a part of the legacy.
Nuovi Totino's Pizzeria Rolls. Prova tutte le tue specialità italiane preferite, come le meatball marinara cheesy garlic e il chicken parmesan. In just 60 seconds, you can't get more Italian. It's on. Let's roll.
Wow, very good. Two spots there that we saw from Tomiga, and together with us also we have Julian. Julian works with Tony at Tomiga. Julian, how are you?
I'm doing great. Hi, Felipe.
Great. Can you tell us a little bit about you and what you do there at Tomiga?
Sure. I've been, I work with Tony as the executive producer at Tomiga. And as Tony said, we have a wide variety of work that we do, ranging from, 30-second spots to corporate videos, long-form videos, and a lot of work on social media.
Okay, thank you for that. And you left out a little bit about all your experience. I saw your short bio, and it's really not that short. You have a lot of experience, but we're going to be talking a little bit more about that very soon. We also have with us Daniel Saldivar. And Daniel, where are you talking to us from?
Yeah, hi Felipe. Hi, everybody. My name is Daniel Saldivar. We're actually based here in San Antonio, Texas, same as Tomiga. And yeah, so we run White Rhino, and we're based primarily doing visual effects for music videos and commercials. And over the last 7 years, we've worked on a lot of independent movies that go straight to Netflix, Redbox, Amazon, etc. And that's kind of a little bit about us.
Cool, thanks. And let's take a look at a little bit about on some of the works that White Rhino has done. Nice work there, Daniel. And last but not least, we have Gabriel from Ace Enterprises. Hey, Gabriel, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing today?
Very well. Can you also give us a little bit an overview about what you and your company do?
Yeah, I run a small video production company in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We do a lot of commercials, corporate videos, promotional videos, training videos, and so forth. Most of the time, it's just me. So I will do, the writing, pre-production, shooting, sound, editing, motion graphics, pretty much everything. As of late, I've been able to bring in a PA occasionally, which is like baby stepping into a team. But I hope to be learning more about that throughout this conversation. No reel for me today. In 2020, I am in the middle of rebranding and creating new content. So more to come later.
Fantastic. So everyone, this is our panel. The five of us here are going to be talking about business, basically. We're not going to be talking about video editing, or we're not going to be talking about necessarily how you do this and use that camera and so on and so forth. But this is going to be very interesting because I think right now it's very important for us to know how to make money and how to grow. And if we're going to bring someone in to our companies, how can that benefit us as a company and so many other things. Now, I wanted to start this a little bit more like a conversation because I actually want the whole thing to be more of a conversation. Everything started with Tony reaching out to me, but he reached out to me because Dan reached out to him. Daniel, can you tell us a little bit about how this whole thing started? Why you're having so many questions? Let's just start with the conversation, and then I want Tony to pick that up.
Absolutely. So me and Tony have been friends for the last year or so, a couple years. And right now we're in a time of expanding our reach, and I'm really challenging ourselves as a company to create opportunities. And right before COVID happened, I was on a multi-city tour, LA, Miami, Atlanta, and we were looking to expand to those cities. We've had more project space there, and so we're looking for more offices, office space or collaboration space. And with any growth comes resistance and growing pains, right? And I can be transparent enough to say, like, as a solopreneur, I've done it all from not only just doing the work, but looking for clients and doing the paperwork and the accounting and all that other stuff. And over the last couple of years, I really pushed myself to grow and bring other people on board as a team, but not just to grow as a team, but actively replicate myself. So I made up my mind. I wasn't going to be the guy on the machine every time clicking all the buttons, that I wanted to celebrate the wins of the team and let other people have their moments to shine too, because they have a dream as well. And if I can be a part of that, just to be one of the stepping stones, it's amazing. I'm not interested in being an overnight success. If I made it by myself, then that was successful. But if I brought others with me, I knew that that would be significant. And so recently we had the opportunity and the privilege to bring somebody on our team as a producer. And other than a few guidelines and a few thoughts of what I thought I wanted on the team, I was just like, well, I've never had an admin person, a producer. I've worked with tons of them, but to have somebody in the office, day-to-day stuff. And Tony is one of those people that I can go to and accept mentorship and just sit under him and, hey, throw ideas at him and he throw ideas at me. And I can go to him as a counselor and say, hey, Tony, you've gone through this. Do you have any suggestions? Do you have any advice? And I think I just texted him real quick. And then a day later, he's like, I wrote Felipe, and this would be a great idea for a podcast live stream. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. I'll tune in. What date is it? And then he's like, no, we want you to be on it. And I was like, oh, I think I put my coffee back down. I was like, okay, whatever you need. So this is me pushing myself to grow and further everything else.
Tony.
Yeah, it was interesting telling you, Daniel, and you were just like, okay, yeah, let me know. And like, no, you have to be on it. This is coming from you. This is resonating with you. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's been, great having our conversations that we have, and I encourage everyone to try to do that. Daniel says counseling, but it's not really that. It's just two guys getting together, and we have our journeys and we have our visions, but it's just nice to be able to share your ideas. And sometimes you can't necessarily propose ideas or just talk about ideas kind of on a virtual white wall. So it's really good to be able to just kind of bounce stuff that you're thinking about. Just the process of saying something out loud and being in a room with somebody else, everything starts to come together a little clearer. So I really, really cherish those moments, and I encourage everyone to find a mentor or just to find another colleague. Can be in a different city, but it's so huge to just inspiring, to collaborating, and just figuring and navigating, because at the end of the day, we're all navigating, and there's a lot of things that we might think are unique situations, but they're not. A lot of us are experiencing it, so it's really a cool way to just discover and learn and grow. So thanks, Daniel, for all those conversations that we had. So yeah, so that's pretty much how we got here now. It's like, have those questions, put them on hold, and let's go online and talk. So I don't know where you want to go from here. If you just want to start rattling questions.
Excellent
away,
idea. Well, Julian is going to have a lot of the answers to those questions, and you as well, Tony. The other reason I also have Gabriel here, invited him over, is because him and we have talked about this over and over and over again. But both him and we're in positions that we are just ourselves. I was able to have several projects in which I would bring people in. I would always okay, look, it's expensive to work with me, and I was always making the budget okay, the budget, I need people, and I could afford that because I have a financial blanket with my fiance that allows me to say, okay, maybe I will not get you as a client because this is too expensive, but not everyone can do that. And of course, this COVID situation makes everything a little bit worse. So I think we can dive into some of the questions that we already have here. And I think the very first one, it is, what are the roles of a producer in a smaller production office? So we have, Tony keeps on saying that he's a small boutique, but it's difficult to believe that he's a small boutique. And Daniel, you definitely cannot say that.
Yeah, 100%. I like to run a small team, so I think there's 3 other people here besides me. So it's very small, it's very compact, and that just gives us the flexibility to do the different things. And then we have a full roster of freelancers on spreadsheets. Hey, we need 4 or 5 other people. Reach out to them, and it's all remote based. So it's been kind of interesting to kind of be in that realm and working remote the last 7 years already. And then now COVID happens, and everyone's kind of jumping on the bandwagon. So
and definitely want to hear more about this of bringing people in as needed, because that doesn't seem as clear to everyone as it is for you, for example.
Sure.
Well, I just also want to. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Dan.
Go ahead. I have a 2-part question. First of all, did all of you start as solo operators, as freelancers, before growing a team?
No.
You didn't join a team.
No, I started working at a facility back in the day. Back in the day. So I kind of worked my way up in that facility, and then I jumped to another facility where I had a chance to become a partner. So I've actually not been a freelancer starting off. I've just been from facility to facility. And a few years ago, when I left the previous company that I was a partner in, that was really my first time going into the freelance world and experiencing that environment. And it was refreshing because I got to shed a lot of the responsibilities, and when you're a company, you have to live and operate and think in a certain box, in a certain vessel. So being a freelancer was great because now I'm much more independent, and it came about me just exploring, learning, and sharing knowledge, and just just doing my thing and working. So the past few years have been going back into the company profile, where now there's a team, it's a permanent team, there's employees. So that's been an interesting journey. And I did want to preference too that every situation is different. Every company is different, and the market segment is going to be different. So depending if you're coming from LA, working only in movies, versus working at a corporate shop versus being a solopreneur. So, you really need to think about that and evaluate that. But I think these core principles and things we talk about will apply in some ways to everyone.
Well, and that's the second part of my question. Should be a shorter question. If we're talking about defining the role of the producer, would you say that when you are a solo operator, having to wear all the hats, including producer, that role is somewhat having a different definition than a specific dedicated producer on a larger team? I mean, would you say that there's a somewhat different definition that applies to producer in those two contexts?
A different definition, meaning from myself producing my own work versus hiring a producer?
In a way, because when you're producing your own work, you're also overseeing the business and doing the shooting and the editing, and so you're kind of wearing all these different hats. So you're
Yeah.
maybe not able to fulfill all the producer roles like somebody who's laser focused on that could.
Yeah, it's a challenge because the smaller team, I say at Tomiga we are like, the 300, the movie 300. We're a small band of super warriors. At least that's what I tell myself. But we all have to share the load and wear multiple hats. So from the creative side of things, grip and just being able to carry and move lights to post-production, everything, account executive, all the admin stuff, you have to share and do all those roles. And at a certain level and a certain amount of threshold of work, it's manageable. And it was manageable for me. But then as you start to get more work, even if it's small work, it doesn't have to be big work. Just you start to add more layers of work. You still have to do all the paperwork. You still have to do all of the communication between the different, aspects of the client. If you're dealing with an agency, the producers, they have producers. So all that stuff starts to add up. And for me, it got to a point where it was really affecting my ability to be creative. Right, I started to slip in a lot of ways. So the things that I like to do to prepare creatively and the research that I would like to give to a project, I wasn't able to because I had to fulfill all these other roles and aspects. So at some point you have to do it, but then at some point it gets too much, and that's when you really need to think about, I need help. So do I bring on temporary help? Do I bring on full-time help? Those are the questions. And I'll stop talking and let the others get in there.
Yeah, I really want to hear from Julian, actually, because Julian is the actual producer in our panel, and he's really the key of actually making everyone here understanding, not only his boss, because this is kind of like a second interview for him, but is for everyone else that is in this position of Gabriel, of Daniel. What can a producer like Julian bring in? And importantly, in small productions, in small businesses, Julian, you have a big job there to answer that question.
Sure. Well, and a little bit more about my background, as we kind of mentioned or talked about a little bit earlier. I started out as a freelancer in LA, and it wasn't kind of utilizing all my skills as a shooter or editor and any of those things. It was strictly in post-production. So, and that's, starting from the bottom as a post PA and just learning the editing room, working my first time like on a nonlinear editing system, and also working in film. So, and that was working in film, feature films and television shows and things like that. But what you really learn by doing that is creating relationships, strong relationships, and a strong work ethic. And so those things are really important, whether you're freelancing and kind of doing like a one-man shop, or even providing a specific service. When I moved back to Texas, I found a home at a post-production facility that was fully staffed. Everything was still kind of segmented in terms of our responsibilities. So when I came in, I was an assistant editor and grew as an editor, and really was on the creative side. I spent a lot of time there, grew, became a producer, and then shifted to strictly producing and not working in any of the creative side. So I haven't really, I should say in between that, there's some freelance opportunities where you do handle more like kind of all of the responsibilities. Tony and I actually met while I was kind of in a hiatus period, moving from one city back to another, where I was editing. So Tony didn't know me as a producer when we got to know each other. So from that standpoint, it was about when he was looking for to add someone in that role. I'm not sure how confident he was in my ability to kind of take that role on, but we had met each other. From a personality standpoint, I think we got along really well. We talk about the relationship that Daniel and Tony have in terms of like a mentorship. being able to share stories and share experiences and learn from those, we both were still able to do that. And I think much the same way, it was at that point, and kind of still is, we're able to share our backgrounds and come from different perspectives to see how we want to move the business forward. So Gabriel, what you were saying earlier about filling roles, the smaller the company, the more the number of roles increase. So when Tony and I kind of met and kind of discussed what he was looking for, it really was about both of us kind of feeling out what we could provide. For me, and my perspective was, what is it that Tony is doing? What are all the roles that he's assuming? Kind of understanding that it's pretty much everything. And then what are the things that he wants to eliminate from that list? And do I feel comfortable filling in that role? So it could be just a producer, it could be semi-accountant, it could be HR, it could be all these things. So what are those things that I want to clear his table so that he can focus on the things that he really wants to focus on, both from a creative standpoint, but from a business growth standpoint as well.
So you're saying that in a smaller company, in a smaller production, let's say that you would be the first person being hired. You're saying that it's not necessarily the head of a producer per se, but more of a right hand, right? More almost like a business partner.
It could be. I mean, every situation is different. So everyone is going to want to focus on different things. In some instances, you might just need a producer, and that's all that you really want. And at times, it could be project-based. And I think all of us are experienced in that, here's a project that's going to be bigger, so let's hire on either more graphic designers or a bigger crew to shoot or not, and very specific to that project. So it could be related to that, or it could be, let's look at something either short or long-term that isn't to a specific project. And that's where really decisions are made in terms of what's our current workload, can we support bringing someone on, and how can we support that, bringing on an additional either salary or at least temporary payroll. Now for Tony and I, again, we had many conversations when I first, even before coming on board, and then as I came on board. It wasn't permanent in the beginning because we're still kind of feeling out what that need is and how well I filled that need, and how that affected the company. So I mean, but each circumstance is unique, and so sometimes it will call for someone who might want to share some of those business responsibilities, but sometimes not. And it really is dependent on what you feel that you need.
I have another quick two-part question, if I may. First of all, how would you, in general terms, define the role of a producer? And then the second part is, say someone like me, only because there are lots of freelancers, solo people out there. If I or one of them was to bring a producer on board, what could they look forward to that producer handling, and therefore freeing them up to do elsewhere, otherwise?
Well, I would say the very specific role of the producer is really project based, and sometimes, by the way, we still will, as Tomiga, bring on a producer to handle specific projects. So that person really takes over the communication between client and Tomiga, as well as if it requires a bigger crewing up, handling all of the releases, handling casting and all the different roles within the production, kind of overseeing that, and budgets and talent and coordination, and so really is specific to overseeing the production as a whole. And if we're looking specifically for a producer, it would be handling those roles, kind of managing that production, and then making sure everything's on time, and in terms of wrapping normal days, or keeping budgets, keeping within budgets, and then finalizing everything, and closing out projects. So it's very specific if we're looking at, a producer role just by itself.
You've convinced me that I need a producer, because those are all the things I don't enjoy doing.
Well, it depends, right? You have to really look at the workload that's coming in, what is projected to come in. How have you been handling your productions? And I'm assuming that we're talking about productions, doing live action. So, there's certain pain points depending if you're doing post only or if you're doing production. So even like Julian was saying, like he's on board full time and he's managing all the projects, but we have to look at what projects are coming in and what level of detail and coordination and communication do we need to bring on a producer so they can facilitate that, so we can still oversee and manage everything as a whole, but let them get in there until the nitty gritty and make sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed and all that good stuff. So, even now we'll bring people on just to facilitate management, like Julian said, for a very specific job. And that frees Julian up to make sure that he can oversee all the other projects that are happening and still keep communication between those other jobs. So I would say, yeah, it's really important. Even if you don't have a producer, bring somebody on for a specific project, just because the more people you have, a team, a collaborator, you start to collaborate. It'll free you up. You'll start to see some of those headaches. Gabriel, I think, will start to kind of go away, and allow you to kind of breathe and focus on the creative or other aspects of the job.
Exactly. Yeah, I've always seen a producer as like, think about a film set where the producer creates a situation where everything can be possible for the director, so that he or she can focus on the creative and working with the actors and the DP and so forth.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, it's all you.
There's lots of different types of producers as well. So we got to make sure we just say that.
That's what I'm trying to narrow down, is a clear definition.
There's a lot of different types of producers. If you're in the movie industry, there's an assortment of levels of producers, from executive all the way down to just coordination, where they just handle specific coordination for specific departments. So it just depends. I think for us in our market, we're talking a producer that can handle all the coordination, communication, budgeting, talent for a job, and they still may hire a sub producer that handles specific types of administration, paperwork, and dealing with all of the permits and things that we need. But for us, it's for somebody to handle all the management, coordination, budgeting for specific production for our company. I had something else I was going to say. Julie mentioned something earlier, and I think this applies to Daniel, and let me know, Daniel, it was really important that I was bringing somebody on that was going to work permanent for me. So those conversations I think are huge. And not just having let's just sit down and talk about your skills, because it's not just about skills. You can find people who have skills anywhere. It's about finding somebody that you can get along with, somebody who's not going to just be a yes person, somebody who's going to, call your bluffs and point things out, but somebody who also wants to be a part of the team, wants to help lead if that's what you want, and just the personality. How do they deal under stress? Talk about those different past experiences of how they dealt with these crazy clients and crazy jobs. So the more you can dig and have conversations, you'll start to get to know that person a little bit better. And how do they relate to stress? How do they relate to a client, yelling at them or saying stuff? I'm not saying that we should all accept yelling in that scenario, but how do they deal with that? How are they going to respond to those things? So I think those are you'll start to pick those up when you have more conversations and just talk about the past and talk about jobs. So that's a really important thing, is to talk.
Let's add a little bit on Daniel here, because he is pretty much a big reason why we are all talking. Daniel, in which position are you right now? Because we heard from questions from Gabriel and the answers from Julian and Tony about these things. And knowing that you have hired people in the past, we can see you're real. You definitely couldn't. Well, you could maybe do those things by yourself, but it's much better to work with the team, right? in which position are you right now that you are looking at hiring a producer? What are your reasoning behind looking at a producer right now?
Yeah, I think, again, it's just making the decision that after doing this for so long that we wanted to grow and we really wanted to push ourselves. Going back to what like Tony was saying a second ago, it's like the people that we look at as a team, I rather have people that have no experience and a fantastic attitude versus people that are, oh, I know it all and all this stuff, but they have a very negative attitude. And we've definitely had people like that in the office. And once that project's wrapped, it's like, okay, it's time to move on. And a lot of times, it's just time to cut the losses and move forward. So going back to the question, why are we in this position, is because we're wanting to grow, we're wanting to expand, and having some of the conversations with Tony, just pushing me to go further, getting me outside our comfort zone. I think a lot of times creatives and people, let's say in our position that are owners or solopreneurs, that we get in the way a lot of the times because we have so much self-doubt, so many things that are like, well, what is someone else going to say? And for me, I was like, well, it's time to cross that threshold and push further. I know we had a conversation with Julian once, and he was saying, Julian, please correct me where I'm wrong. Are you growing to add, or are you adding to grow? Is that the term?
Sure, I just kind of came up with it. So
yeah, well, I've
how it's rephrased. But it's it's something that we talked about before. It's like kind of, Felipe, as you mentioned before, it's like the chicken or the egg argument. Like, are you reacting, or are you being proactive in your growth, and kind of how you're looking at how you want to either grow your company or just grow, not necessarily from a numbers standpoint, but just there's growth even within. Because as you're looking to fill certain roles, I think oftentimes we're looking at adding people in. But another way to look at that also is to, if you have employees, or if you have people that you've been relying on a freelance basis, kind of also let's not forget that they might be able to have some potential and some desires to move out of their current roles. And so you can look at them to see, is there potential in those? Is there a desire for them to fill those roles? And then are you okay with allowing that person the opportunity to grow so that they can be beneficial for you in the long term? So without adding a number to your employee list. So if it's just you and someone else, or maybe you have 2 employees, what are the different roles that person can bring to the table as well? So it doesn't have to be adding another salary, if you will, but just investing in their growth, and which will allow you to share some responsibilities with them as well.
Well, regarding the chicken and the egg thing, Felipe and I have our own separate show, and we've talked about this a lot. I think the show is actually where I first met Tony. But like in my position, if I had the right client to the right job, I would then have the budget to add a team member. Or if I had the right team member, maybe we'd be in a position where we could get that next level job. But there has to be some sort of baseline or nuts and bolts level. I'm hoping to find a commonality between you guys where, once I had X situation that enabled me to make that leap. Jumping from job to job is not a really financially tenable place to be to grow your business. So there has to be a certain tier or echelon of client. Would you agree that gives you the freedom to pursue those opportunities?
Okay, so the thing that, if I'm understanding the question correctly, we can do one big job or lots of little jobs. And again, I'm coming from a background of independent movies. And so those movies have under $1 million, under $500,000, and a visual effects budget will be under 5K, under 10K. And people get very ambitious with that. And so with all our years of experience, I've done the $500 jobs where you're on for a month and a half. So you make zero money, but you're gaining all the experience. And at that time of doing tons and tons of, I think we've worked on over 350 projects over the last 7 years. So there's just tons of stuff. And then sitting there and realizing I'm here working till 4 or 5 in the morning. Do I want this as my life? And then finally getting married and and taking that responsibility to have someone in my life and say, like, I can't be doing this 7 a.m. to 4 a.m, sleep 3 hours on the couch, roll out of bed, make sure the 3D render is okay. And it's like, it's not sustainable, very much in the same thing. And again, like, I try to surround myself with a lot of older people and really try to learn from their experiences. So me as a young person, as a young man, don't go through those same things. So I'm a person that asks 1,000 questions and sits and really looks at a situation, what's good now, and then where will we be in a few months, and where will we be in a couple of years. So going back to the question, and I think and again, this is Tony pushing me to diversify and get outside my comfort zone versus like, hey, we're only going to work with this little group here, and then realizing the World Wide Web blew everything open, right? And we started working remote in 2012. So we never really worked here in San Antonio. All our clients have been in LA, New York, overseas, and all these great, amazing places and great opportunities. And that has become its own thing of, hey, we don't have 50 people in the office. How can we make something really great happen from a small place and do great, amazing work? And again, to jump on an airplane and go somewhere, that's kind of been the thing that's been our unlocking moment. The light has gone on of like, hey, you can go to these different high-end cities, be the person on site, and you're not Bob from across the street came in and you really looked at more as the expert, the person who knows what they're doing and confident enough. Going back to that, again, I feel like a lot of times the creative person, or us as an editor, us as a director, us as the solopreneur, we get in the way a lot because we're not willing to let go, and we're not willing to take our hands off a little bit, put the keyboard aside. And I've really tried to push myself. Like, I'm a horrible communicator, and I've really pushed myself to, hey, how am I communicating with my team? Is my tone right? Is my inflection right? How am I coming across to our clientele? What does our image look like? You were talking about like rebranding, and we've been doing that since November, really taking our brand seriously, and tons of ideas versus, what are visual effects looked at, and how can we overcome that obstacle? How can we overcome that hurdle to be what we envision ourselves to be? And again, I feel like we get in the way of a lot of that. So like what Julian was saying is like, he's almost a right-hand man. And we have a gentleman here in the office, Kyle, who's our team lead, and he's been our right-hand man because I've grown with him, I've shared with him, and he came from a video game production background. So he had a lot of like great Photoshop skills, 3D skills, but started training him in compositing and training him in editorial, training him on how to get some of these things ready. So it was a very cross-pollination. And I think it's going to go back to the individual, the solo person who has that ability to say, I'm okay with teaching somebody my skills. Again, my goal is to replicate myself so that at any time, if I have to be out of the office, I can trust the team here. And I feel like a lot of times people, like solopreneurs, will keep saying, they just don't trust somebody enough because, oh, what if they screw something up? And I think for me, I've given the team the space to fail and the room to fail. And we have our huddles and we have our talks. I'm 100% a result of somebody paving the way for me, somebody like a Tony, like a Julian, that are paving the way and going through some of the obstacles. So I'm standing on their shoulders. And then for some of these guys right out of school that work with us, they're standing on my shoulders. So it took me 7 or 8 years to get this client. But here they are a few months out of school or within a year out of school, and they're already at that level. So I think it's really a pushing the culture and pushing that, because a lot of times it can be toxic out there and it's very cutthroat. And I'm very much the person of like, how can we grow together? How can we become better? Because if Tony can get that big job and it's say 50K in billing, that's a win for everybody because we can all grow, we can all develop, and we can all learn from there versus maybe on the Fiverr network. Hey, can you do it for $30? Hey, can you do it for $50? Oh yeah, I can do 35. You know what I mean? So
Tony, how do you approach this thing about trust? Because I think I can sit here that everyone agrees that trust is a very big part of bringing people in. And did you have a problem with trusting people in the beginning when you were growing your company, when you're going from just being yourself, or actually when you started your company? Did you have any problems with that, or are there tips?
Yeah, I'll answer that question. But to jump back onto Gables, if I may,
Yeah,
you have
of
to look
course.
at risk versus not risk. Like my growth was income jobs first before I brought stuff on, so I was willing to sacrifice my time and efforts to stretch myself to go over all those jobs and all the different aspects of those jobs before I realized, okay, I'm now at the point of drowning and I need to bring somebody on to take care of these roles. So that was my take for, obviously pre-COVID. Um, so I think you'd have to do that for yourself and evaluate, like, what am I willing to take on risk-wise to grow? Is the producer or person I'm bringing on, are they taking on, sales or an AE position where they're going to be dealing with clients in that aspect? So those are things you have to ask yourself and figure out. For me, again, it was just um, I'll wait till I can myself build a base, a clientele that I want to force my own hand to have to bring somebody on to help share the load. Um, so yeah, each person's going to be different. And then your question, Felipe, about trust. Yeah, trust is huge. I mean, trust is everything. And what Daniel was saying, it's like I feel like there's two different versions of trust. There's the creative internal aspect of trust, and then there's like the business side of trust. Because people you bring on, you know, uh, they are an extension of your brand. They're an extension of the brand, right? Like
They're
I don't think of
representing you.
Tamiga as me. Yeah, I don't think of Tamiga as me anymore. Tamiga is now its own brand, and I have to make sure that I can just help push and guide it and keep it within. But everybody that you bring in, even freelancers, that's an extension of your brand. And it doesn't mean that like maybe you're bringing in somebody who's only going to be working on the inside and they're not going to be interacting with clientele, but still the idea of a brand and trusting them to keep your creative vision and to keep your creative collaboration. At the end of the day, it's like I can say yes, I like that, no, I hate it, and do it this way, right? I mean, anybody could say that, but it's being able to create trust, like Daniel was saying, so that you give them a safe place to fail, right? It's okay to fail. Failure's good. Like try it, experiment within the confines of schedules and timelines and budgets and that stuff. But you know what I'm saying? It's like trust is huge because it affects every aspect of your business. So bringing on a producer, somebody who's going to be taking on a lot of admin position roles, producing roles, interacting with clients. And for us, a lot of our clients are ad agencies, so it's multiple different levels of interaction. So those pre-conversations that I had were all about us discovering each other and learning to trust each other and being okay with like, yeah, I trust him because I like, you know, we talked about these past jobs that were just crazy jobs, and I see how he handled it. I see how he was able to step in, and it happened to us last year. We had a job. Things like sometimes they go crazy, and situation kind of got a little heated, and Julian stepped in and was just this cool, calm, collective level head that just came in and said, let's do this. I think we should adjust this. Let's not worry about this aspect just yet. And it was just a relief because I'm out of town. I'm not there. And knowing that he can come in and just literally orchestrate something and keep things moving, that's huge. So, yes, trust is huge. If you're bringing on somebody, have those conversations. Sit down with them multiple different times. Don't just have one little sit-up interview. Try to really figure out who they are. And then if you already have employees, it's important to communicate them, to talk to them, and try to let them know that you trust them. You want it. Like for me, it's important that I empower my employees to make decisions, right? I just don't want them to be like, well, I can't make a decision. Obviously, we collectively make decisions, and because we communicate and talk and we have our huddles, we kind of know where things are at. But I really want to make sure that if they're empowered, they feel like they're part of, and that they're attributing to the vision and lifting us all up together. So I think that's super, super important. I hope that answers your question.
Well, it does, but it brings up another question, of course. It's always going to be like that, and I think it's a question that both Gabriel and I have, and that question goes for Tony, for Daniel, and for Julian, is there a way that someone that has their own company, and right now they're like, okay, I don't have clients, or I have the clients that I do not want to have, it's the cheap ones, and I want to go to the next level. I want to get that client that on one job I will not kill myself, I will have a crew, and I will have budget. Is that one, when you're bringing in a producer? Two, is it normal for a producer to act as a salesperson, reaching out to clients and looking and bringing new clients? And three, related to this, if that's normal, is it that how would that person be paid? Like a percentage of the net income for that project? Is there anything that's normal or industry standard that you can, as an entrepreneur, as a solopreneur, reach out to a producer and say, this is what I'm looking for? And I imagine that you know what I mean, right? Is there a way that someone can just take that leap without really costing them out of their pocket when they don't have a project?
I'm going to let Jillian answer that question, but yes, I mean, there is a normal and then there isn't a normal. You can slice that 1,000 different ways. Again, depending on the market size that you're in, the size of your company, the type of work you do can also affect that. You know, we're talking about production and we're talking about visual effects and being creative in this video space, but there's a lot of different silos, a lot of different industries within this broad space. So some industries might have a normalcy of how that would apply, and some others may be a little different or differ slightly. So I'll let Jillian answer that question, but yes, and yes, and no, and yes.
Okay, Jillian.
I agree. I think, and it kind of goes back to every situation is unique. I think the bigger your organization, the easier it is just to bring them into the fold and have them just say, we're going to pay you a salary, and this is what you get. And if you have connections, then a lot of times, I've always considered every job that I've had to be built around relationships and not so much project-based, but every opportunity you have, whether you get an opportunity to bid on something, whether you win it or not, it's about creating relationships. Sometimes those relationships are fruitful. Sometimes you're just building trust in certain clients, so you might offer them services even without them really paying you. Again, that's not ideal, but sometimes you do that to build on those relationships. And so as a producer, some of those relationships follow you from one place to another, whether as a freelancer or when you go to another place, some of those relationships follow. Now, depending on the size of on what you can afford, whether from a salary standpoint or payroll standpoint or just from a project-to-project standpoint, it's going to determine, I would imagine, how you approach your relationship with this producer. Whether you're bringing them on staff, whether you're bringing them on temporarily, like those conversations could be had, and I think they're all different in terms of how you share those clients. Because sometimes there's, in the case of Tony and I, we have a lot of shared relationships. Our history kind of is within the same market and then outside of markets. So, I guess at one point we were working for, not necessarily, but competing organizations, so we shared a lot of the same clients, a lot of the same people, we knew and had worked with. So we bring those to the table. So it wouldn't be like, okay, well, this is my client that I'm bringing to you. It's just like, oh, it's great that we have a shared history. We know these people, so it's great. But in terms, like the way that Tony and I approached it, it really was more about providing what could I bring to Tony and to Mega to kind of, not necessarily from a direct sales standpoint, but from an overall kind of, what could I bring to the table? And sales is one of those things. And I hate to call it sales because I don't really look at it as direct monetary exchange for services, because sometimes, again, it doesn't.
Relationship management.
That's exactly, I think, what we call that. So, and from that standpoint, I think that's what we bring, and that's with new clients or old clients that I have or clients that Tony has. And each sometimes it changes from project to project. So there might be a project that comes in that I handle completely from the producer standpoint, and all the budget and negotiations and all that stuff, and Tony will just oversee the creative. And then there are other instances where things might be a little bit different, where I say, Tony, why don't you take these conversations on? And it could be with the same client, but maybe Tony has a little bit more history with them or whatever. So we can share those. So it's not necessarily you bring someone in and then I'm no longer going to do this, and here are the lines of responsibilities that we have, and we can't cross those lines. It really is going back to what you asked Felipe earlier, trust, and how you can share those things, and how you can, Tony will look to me for certain things, and sometimes I'll say, I'll take those on, but Tony, can you do it for this one? And it's not a problem, because it's not, we know kind of we're working together for the same cause. So there's, again, a lot of conversations and a lot of feeling out of how we can best handle each different situation.
Do you have, real quick, do you have a dedicated salesperson, or is that as part of your producer role? I mean, are you the one who more often than not finds and builds relationships with these potential clients, or like how does that process happen?
Well, we have kind of going back a little bit to your earlier question about how to grow. We have a really great relationship that's established and allows us to have kind of a steady work, if you will. It's not always steady, but we have a strong relationship that we do a lot of work for. One of the things that Tony and I always talk about, and again, I think we share the responsibility, is looking for new avenues for relationships. And we both take that on. We talk about how we want to do it. Some of those conversations relate to marketing, because it's a big shift when you're going from a small company where you're handling everything, where you're looking at marketing yourself more in a freelance basis. You're sharing your own personal services and what you can provide. So when you start to grow, so we shift from Tony Gallardo to Tomiga, then you have to look a little bit more about what is it that we do as Tomiga, as opposed to what are the capabilities that Tony has, to what services we provide. And those can be bigger or those can be smaller. But we together kind of, so I guess you could say the sales is within the whole marketing plan that we try to look at. And that's from everything from the language that we use in our conversations, the website, any kind of marketing material that we have. All those little things go into sales now, because it's not just direct putting a sign out and saying call us and then handling those phone calls. It's going out and building those relationships, and as many people as you can have in your organization that are willing, first of all, but that can represent your organization in the way that you want it to be represented, the better. Because those opportunities are going to come from a PA that you have, that you work with, that says, oh, I love working with Gabriel. So if an opportunity comes and that they know they can't handle, they might be able to say, oh, well, I know someone that can handle that. Or if we have an editor or freelancers that we've worked with before that know that we offer those services and can handle that, and of course hire them for that. So those sales opportunities come from everywhere. I don't know that I would call it the primary responsibility. I think it's always a primary responsibility to bring in revenue when you can, but I don't know that it's one person's. If you don't hire a salesperson, then I think it's really a shared responsibility, especially when you're a small organization.
I have here a question from Chad Lafarge on YouTube. How long does it take for you to establish a rhythm and tone of conversation to work well together? I think that would be great for any Tony, Julian, Daniel to talk about, since you're all working with teams. Let's try going for Daniel first.
Yeah. So the question is, how long does it take to kind of get in the rhythm?
Yeah, in the rhythm and having a tone of conversation to work well together. So you're all like a machine.
Got it. I'll start at the kind of the beginning. Like when we had done an open call for interns, and at that point we had like 25 people interested, and we were working with a school here in town to do once a week meeting, and we would work for 3 or 4 hours on a project, and over time you kind of see like who's about it and who's not about it. And from that 25 group, there was maybe 4 or 5 that I could see that were about it, that were showing up, that were doing the work, that were wanting to learn and asking the right questions. And so from there, I was able to say like, okay, these are the 5 to focus on. These are the 5 to pinpoint. So taking that outside and start developing them. And again, I think Julian hit it right on the nose, is relationships are everything. And so as you begin to grow and network and connect with more people, you realize like, people that burn bridges, like they have that reputation, like, oh, that guy burns bridges. And I know we've never wanted to be that. So we've always been very intentional with who we bring on. And what does that process look like? Going out for coffee, talking, chatting, figuring out who they are as people and what they want to achieve, and to see if we have the capability to help them get to that goal. Because we have a lot of people that kind of work with us right out of school, I know they're only going to be with us for 6 months to a year before they go on to their big career job. And then South Texas itself is very limited as far as the type of work that we do. So we're only one of 2 or 3 that actually do it. So if they're wanting to go into something, this is kind of the stop. And again, I wish I had somebody like this when I was coming up to say, hey, here are the basics, here's some ropes, these are the kind of the skills you're going to need, and train them at that aspect. So to develop a rhythm, when we brought on our producer, like I was chatting with her for the last 9 months, like since last July. And we've been having these conversations, and our relationship even goes back further of, oh, hey, she was doing something, she might be interested. Okay, we're not ready there yet. And I feel like it's going to be times, ebbs and flows and seasons in your life and in your company's life, if you're ready to take on that responsibility. And I consider like the whole team my responsibility, because like Tony said, like they're an extension of us, and it's a small office. So we work really close together. It's not like, oh, I'm going to go to the 3rd floor and talk to Bob. It's like, no, Bob is right here across the room. So we need to be able to get along. And I think the tone of the leader is going to set the tone of the team. So if you're very much the person that, hey, what I say goes and don't ask any questions, and very much a drill sergeant, you're gonna be butting your head and go up a very steep hill. But if you're very much the person, and I've been that, I've 100% like, no, I don't want that. Don't look at me that way. Don't do this way. Make sure you click it like that. Where is this email? Nobody sent this. And I've had to learn to kind of chill out, grow, and realize like if I adjust my own attitude and my own outlook on things, then that's going to replicate to the team. And we have this discussion all the time. It's look what there's a friend of ours, he says, I'm like, oh, I got to go roto something. I got to go composite something. He's like, bro, you get to go do this. And we're here in South Texas, and I can tell you like it gets hot. So I know like any chance that we don't have to be outside doing like, landscaping work or working in another industry, like the fact that we get to do this is like a win for everybody. So we're very much grateful for the opportunity to do that. And again, if you come from the right perspective, because we've had people like, hey, I want to do this and I want to make, X amount of dollars and we're going to be about it. And then you're like, they don't even fit well with the team, the dynamics, the culture here, then it's like, it's not going to work. So how do you develop a rhythm and a flow? It's just getting to know the person and honestly, like having a genuine interest in that person, because you're working well with them. You're going to be working late nights. You're going to have the problems where the render crashes. You're going to have the problems where the client, like Tony said, things go south and everyone's looking to you, how you're going to respond and all those types of things. So I would say like relationships are going to be the big thing, and investing in your people, taking them out, doing stuff together, having that coffee. We'll go and get coffee during the holidays. We'll do a company party. We'll go out and get pizza and check out a movie. Like we still have to be cool, but realizing like, this is work. This is what we do. It's a small family. Things can go south really quick. So let's try to avoid all those things and have honest confrontation when the time does happen.
I have a 6-part question.
I have a question for Gabriel. I'm trying to get to a question to Gabriel, actually.
It's just one question, actually. shifting from a conversation on fostering relationships with a team or a potential future team to a relationship with a client. I mean, I have great relationships with almost all my clients. You know, they like the work, they come back to me, but most of them think of it as, you know, this was a nice video. I'll call you again when I need another video. And I've been, for some time now, trying to shift that to show clients and potential clients that this isn't just a video that you play and you're entertained by. It's a resource, it's an investment, it's a tool for your business. So how would any of you or all of you describe shifting the conversation from, you know, how do I say this? It's a different ball game. It's a different ball game when you think of it as just like a video versus this is something I'm going to see ROI on in my company, because that's a different type of client in those scenarios. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I'd like to say a few things on that. I know Julian's nodding his head like he has something too. But I think for me, like, I'm 100% like a disciple, a student of Christo in the future. They're another online class, an online resource that I've gone to, and I've had my largest growth from there. And to me, it sounds like the biggest thing that you might be experiencing is the value conversation. Like, why do they need this? And for me, and in some of those discussions and chatting with some of the guys there, there is 150,000 different editors, camera people, creative directors, et cetera, et cetera. But you're coming from a place of, I stand here amongst the laborers versus the person that, hey, I can come and solve a problem for you, whether you have low sales, whether you have a new product you want to bring out, all those types of discussions. And a lot of times, and I'm just as guilty, that's the only reason I can say all this, is, yeah, I can get that done for you. Yeah, how fast do you need it? And you miss the whole point. So, and you're in the situation that sounds like you're like, how do I get them to see that it's more than just a video? Well, I think it would also just be having those conversations and say, like, look what these results have, and start measuring them as best you can. And at the same time, the thing that we've pushed ourselves is, we've had a small group of clients. Yeah, we're rocking it. We're great. But at some point, the relationship will end, and that's just the nature of humanity. So always we have to be looking for another client, another relationship, and we're always constantly growing. So whether that means, hey, you do explainer videos, or hey, you do about us videos, what is the next thing? Because those are all seasonal. Everybody remembers the explainer videos with the chalk videos. Like, those were hot for a year. But, you know, if you say, I'm going to be an explainer video guy, and by year 3, all your clients have dried up because everything has evolved. The thing I appreciate about Tony is he does stuff not only for like airing, but also for like social media. And that has become the big explosion in the industry. Now people need stuff for their Insta stories. Now they need stuff for their Instagram feeds, their TikToks. Now YouTube is a huge thing, right? Now we can be live here and people will have millions of subscribers. So the thing I would say is finding out the value and figuring out what you really want to do. Because if you're saying, I just want to be a shooter editor, that's great, and people can make a fantastic career about it. But how long do you want to do that? And is that skill interchangeable with somebody else? Could they just hire Bob to do it right out of school for half the price because it's just good enough to be put online? And if the answer is yes, then maybe we need to figure out, hey, let me start repositioning myself, rebranding myself to be that person that I want to be. I had a question. I had an answer to your last question, but
hold on. Let's get Julian to add to this first question as well.
Well, and I think one thing that I've learned, and Tony really encompasses this, is it's not so much asking what you need, but why you need those things. Yeah. So when a potential client or a current client that you have is asking you, like, or saying, hey, we've got this thing, we're not sure what we want to do yet, but we want to do a 2-minute video on this. It's like, okay, well, yeah, anybody can say, all right, let's do that. But Tony will go in and ask questions about what are you looking to achieve, looking at goals, and not just saying how we can respond to that request, but let's dig a little deeper to see what solutions are we providing you. Because sometimes the client won't know what's best for them, even though they have an idea Clients come from all different kinds of backgrounds and perspectives, so some may know exactly what they want and it's right on target. Others just have heard this is what you're supposed to do, and so will come with that request. And so part of that is feeling those clients out. Part of it also is not just trying to respond to that request, but really try to figure out that what they're searching for, because that's really how you build that relationship with that client. Sometimes your answers are going to be longer than just this 2-minute video, even though you may just deliver that 2-minute video. But the longer conversation, it's a little bit bigger time investment sometimes, and sometimes you don't get the direct reward from that financially, but you will create a bigger bond where they rely on you a little bit more for everything that you can bring to them. So a lot of things that we bring to the table, we feel that are inherent as part of what we deliver on a project-by-project basis. And we assume that, oh, well, yeah, this is what we're doing, and we always do this, and the ad people take care of the rest, or the marketing people take care of that. But a lot of times, especially when you're working with smaller companies as clients, they don't have those things, and we fill in those gaps for them. And so you have to realize and apply that value. And again, maybe it's not rewarded immediately, but the client learns to kind of rely on you for those services, so that it creates a longer-term relationship with those.
I have a very quick question on that. So I've also sort of created a discovery form, your questionnaire, to try to pry deeper questions and answers from your client, so you kind of know, you got a better feel for where they're going. And it was designed to get them to be serious about the project, so that when we do meet, it's a deeper conversation. Have you found, as I have, that potential clients who are unwilling to even fill out that discovery form aren't worth moving forward with? Because it's always seemed to me that if they're not even going to fill out like 5 questions, that they're not serious about their project to begin with.
I'll let Tony respond, but I will say that I don't know that I have found a direct correlation yet. Sometimes you can say that, but I think sometimes you might get someone that in a company that's assigned to do a video and might not have the answers and might not feel that they're qualified to really answer those questions. And so it's like,
sure,
I don't really want to answer it. I'll go find somebody else that's not giving me a form to fill out. So I might recommend that if there is a form and you're not getting a lot of participation in that written form, that you translate those questions into a conversation that you can have, which feels less imposing or less people can say they don't know what they want, and it doesn't feel as bad as if they write down saying, I have no idea what I'm looking for. So if you find people unwilling to fill out those forms, then I would maybe follow up with a phone call and see if you can translate those things into a conversation that feels more comfortable for them.
That's great. Okay.
Tony?
Yeah, I would agree. That's a great answer. It depends on who the client is, meaning, is this an existing client? Do you have a previous relationship with them? Is this a brand new client? Is just this a one-off? So I think you got to really evaluate what the situation is, and it's going to be different for each situation. And like Jillian's saying, is this a massive client with multiple departments? And is this somebody in that department just kind of quickly going through something they're not sure? But regardless, once you kind of narrow down what it is, and this is, past relationship or not, I'm a huge fan of conversation. I'm a huge fan of face-to-face. I'm a huge fan of talking directly, because there's so many things that you can pick up from tones in their voice to their body language to their facial responses, and that's a great way to get much more focused conversation, right? If you're just going back and forth on emails, there's so many things that can be taken out of context. Maybe they had a bad day at home and something's going on at the daycare. All these things can kind of add in, and you can. To me, it's just talking directly, is much, much better. So like Julian said, open up the conversation, translate that discovery page into a conversation that you have with them. And depending on if it's a past client or if it's a new client, you can be more conversational or more business-like, if you will. So yeah, it's not really just a one answer thing. For us, for me personally, the discovery page is also, I give those depending on who the client is, depending on our history with the client. So it's going to be different based on the size of the job or the relationship that we have. But yeah,
If
to
you're
me,
shooting a
I'm
wedding,
much more,
yeah. If you're shooting a
And
wedding, you're not going to
sometimes
ask
those
people
things are
what
just
value it has.
right. So sometimes those they just need. It's like it's better to have that for very specific things. So it just depends.
I'm really glad that those are your answers, because I personally do much better in person. It's just, how do you get that meeting in person? Because for all the reasons you said, in an email, what to you was joyful could sound really cold, and it's just all the visual cues are taken out of context. So it's always just, how do you actually get a physical meeting with the people?
Yeah,
But,
one thing that I
but
actually tend to do is actually I asked for a meeting from the very beginning. I was like, hey, can we meet and talk about this? And then later on, after the meeting, I sent a summary email about everything that we talked about. Just put that into writing, and then and make sure that we are all on the same page and keep on going. And with COVID right now, it's like getting on a video conference. Hey, let's connect. Let's get some time on. Someone wanted to say something right now. I have so many questions here. Still. No one. Okay, great. So Daniel was talking about reputation a little bit earlier. And I have a question, and that goes for both Daniel and Tony, since you work on very diverse projects. Do you see any risk to be taking small jobs if you're trying to aim at having bigger clients? Is there any branding risk in that? What do you think, Daniel?
I'll jump on this one because this is exactly what we're doing. Again, like, we were in films and we were doing relatively well with that, and you could easily make a life doing that, and deciding, like, let's try something else, let's try something different. Again, having conversations with friends. Hey, if you really want to go a little bit further, if you really want to hit the goals that you're trying to hit, go more commercial work. And so, like, we started working in music videos in November, and some of those, like, they're super low budget. And the interesting thing is, like, some of those things turn out to be overnight successes and go platinum and be the big thing, right? And then other times you come on with an established artist, and you would think, like, oh wow, they're way up here and they have this huge budget, and then you turn it out like they don't. So for us, it's really trying to figure out, as far as our brand, where we want to position ourselves as. Again, like, going back to the value question, like, we do visual effects.
But I can't see anything or anything.
Oh, sorry. And so the thing I was going to say is, like, I consider myself a designer. So, like, I can solve any problem. You put me into something to direct, you give me something in front of an edit bay, you get me, with some creative design or design brand identity, like, we can handle those conversations. So I would say that reputation is, like, it's all going to start with you as the leader, as the solopreneur. And for us, like, integrity is huge. So if it's like, hey, maybe this person doesn't have the greatest reputation, maybe they have a reputation of burning bridges, maybe that's not the way to go about it.
Reload.
Okay, Tony. But Daniel, what about the fact, like, for example, let's say I have always been taking these very small jobs, let's say with musicians that have no budget, or and I have been paid almost nothing. And I know that I'm capable of much more, and I'm capable of much more mainly if I bring in a team of people. Does any of that, is taking those small jobs affecting, for example, my performance to get a bigger client?
I'd say if you are going to take them for a small amount of time, but you're always having to grow and push the level. I can share with you, like, on my trip, like, I had an opportunity to meet a fellow videographer / editor, and he was doing bare bones music videos, and he was working a full-time job. And he's like, Daniel, how do I switch to go and make this my full-time job, editing and shooting videos? And at the time, he was going to quit and just, I'm going to commit to it. And I was like, whoa, before you quit your guaranteed job, guaranteed paycheck, let's figure out where you need to be first. So I was encouraging him to find an intern just to help with edits, just get it a little bit there, just get the assembly. You're going to go in and correct it and adjust things. So for that, there was like some definite coaching to help him get better. A lot of the times, things that I'm kind of hearing in this conversation is basically, it doesn't sound like we're charging enough, right? How do I charge a little bit more to get somebody else on? And the short answer is just charge more. And for him, he was like, well, let's just say $1,000. Well, how do I charge more? It's like, bro, I've seen your work. You need to like double that. Like today is your last day after we finish this coffee. Wipe that off your website, wipe that off, whatever, double it today, because you can't have a career doing these small jobs. And so again, I've been the person that's like, oh, I can do it for $100. I can do it for $150, 300. And you go up that ladder versus having the confidence in yourself and your team. And again, like, I don't know everything. I'm 100% not being cool with not knowing everything. I bring on people that are smarter than me because they're going to elevate the brand as a whole. So the question is it beneficial to take small jobs to get you where you want to be? It really depends on where you want to be as your business, where you want to be in your life, because I could say yes and just say quit doing all the small work, because at that point you're going to have more headaches, you're going to run out of time, you're going to run out of finances, you're going to have more bills than anything, and you're like, and the thing is, like, the biggest thing that I've always heard is, if you hook me up on this job, do it for $250, I'll pay you $500 for the next time. And that never happens. And so going back to your question, like, do you do forms? Like, we have a basic form on the website, but I really want to get on the phone call with them. And I go through maybe like 20 questions, and they're all project-based, value-based, and we kind of go through the things and figure out. And then from there, I can almost 100% decide if we're going to work with them based off that conversation we're having. And the big thing for me that I've really enjoyed over the last 6 months is being able to tell people no, and that there's power in the no. It's like, that's not right for us. This isn't good. Let's move on, because I've said yes to every job. Yes, yes, yes. And if I can do another 4 or 5 hours, and if I can skip date night and do this, then your whole life becomes a whole thing. And again, like, I'm not interested in being the overnight success. I'm not interested in doing it all by myself. That's why I try to delegate and let other people, like, hey, we can train somebody to rotor. We can help somebody learn how to do these certain things. And so for us, I would say, like, you're going to be shooting yourself in the foot if you just keep taking the small jobs over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And it's as simple as just charge more.
Cool. Julian, I think you really wanted to say something a couple of times. I want to give you some space there.
Sorry, Julian.
Sure. I mean, I think, I should say that Tony and I always have these conversations. Every client is different, and there's always a range of high-level client when we're talking about budget, if you want, but profile as well. And then like more of the direct business-to-business things. I think one thing that sometimes on the inside we get caught up in is qualifying them into those different things. But one of the things that we like to focus on is, how is that going to present on the outside? Not everyone knows what that budget is or how often they do work. But what you want to do is to approach that work and kind of approach everything as it being a representative of what you can provide. So, some people might say, let's put it on the reel or on the website. So you want to be able to approach that, and you assess everything differently, and you say, can we do that but still deliver something that we would feel proud of? And then there are those things that, of course, that you do from a practical sense. It's like, do we need that income? And then is this something that we can just go out, provide to the client, and then maybe it's not worthy? That we still always filter that through as it goes out the door. Is it something that if anyone saw our name on it that we'd be okay with? And so there's always that. And sometimes that means we give a little bit more than we should. But I think that goes into the pride that we have in our work. That goes into the relationships that we're building with those clients, whether they're a one-time client or not. Every experience every client has with you is an opportunity for another experience to come your way. So, if it's a small business, they may have a relationship with someone else that knows, oh, well, who did your video? It looks great. And then, again, they're not always as rewarding as they can be from that standpoint. But I think we always talk about putting out work that represents who you are as a company or as a freelancer or whatever it is. Now, and at different times throughout the season or the year, there's going to be different opportunity costs. So at times you're going to be busier than other times, and so that work is easier to say no to at certain times because it's like, well, I can't do this $5,000 job because there's a $50,000 job that we'd have to give up on. But other times you can be creative with how you approach those, whether it's bringing other people on to cover those things, like maybe you take that project on, but you don't apply yourself to that because you're busy working on something else. So it really depends on your need and whether you're looking at it strictly from a financial standpoint or if you bring in the relationship standpoint as well.
Now, this always started, I think, with, if now I'm recalling everything correctly, Daniel, you wanted to hire a producer, right? Have you, first question, it's just a yes or no. Have you hired a producer already?
Yes, we did. We brought her on, yeah.
Okay, excellent. So now the rest of the question goes for Gabriel, actually, which is, has this conversation so far changed your perspective on bringing in a producer to work with you? Because right now, I mean, the work has been done by Julian and Tony with Daniel to get a producer. So right now, you don't have a producer, and I guess in some ways you're in the same place as Daniel was.
I have a producer, and I have an editor, and I have a MoGraph artist, and a writer, and a sound mixer, and they're all in the room with me.
You can count yourself there.
But
Oh, yeah.
no, I'm fully convinced about the need for it and the benefit for me, and admittedly right now with this pandemic going on, my business is pretty much dried up. So I'm in somewhat of a dark place as far as optimism goes. My business isn't going anywhere. I'll keep running. That's fine. But 2020 for me was supposed to be the year where, I rebrand my company. I'm taking on a few really big projects that are the type of work I want people to see. And I've had this conversation with Felipe before, but it's like, right now you go to my website, you've got a bunch of videos that I've done. People can say, okay, he can do that, fine. I wanted to shift away from that and rather put something out that's like, this is what I did. And when people see that, they're like, I want something like that. I want them to go after the specific thing that I built versus what you were saying just a few minutes ago about, well, you're a craftsman. Yes, you can shoot, you can edit. There's a whole that's greater than some of its parts. But you need a certain level of budget to do that. I mean, I'm not going to do all that for $500 or even necessarily for $3,000. I mean, it's scalable. So right now I'm just trying to find more reliable clients, only because the lower the budget the client, I find the more demanding they are. And
Absolutely.
The ones who are willing to pay more understand the value of it already, probably because they already have some experience working with video. And so that dynamic is usually healthier, and you both benefit from each other more than, again, the lower paying client, which doesn't mean I don't appreciate my lower paying clients, but there's no growth in that. So anyway,
so
yes,
maybe the question,
I want that, but I'm not at a point financially where I could even dream of
I have some thoughts.
taking that lead. Yeah.
Go ahead, Tony.
I have some thoughts. And that is that take a step back and let's not look at if I get to this point, then this will happen. Let's look at how we can take small steps to get to that point. And I think, one of the biggest conversations we had is relationships. And just as much as it's important to have a relationship with your internal team, your external team, meeting your clients, that producer role, right? I think, why can't you build relationships with multiple producers now? A lot of times folks are willing to work at multiple different levels and at different rates. Mm-hmm. You talk about a corporate rate versus an ad commercial rate versus a movie industry rate. those will fluctuate, and they'll fluctuate by market. So I feel like you should be building a relationship or relationships with producers in your market that you can start to build bond and trust with. And I think you can also start to think of them not just as, I have a big job, I have a big producer. Well, there's a lot of things, like you were saying earlier, and I got disconnected for a second, but the craftsmanship, and I can do it all, and there's value in that. But there's also value in the sense of of showing your client or potential client that you are not operating like a solopreneur or a freelancer, that you are replicating and operating more like a machine, a business company, a collective, if you will. So you might just think about bringing in a producer to do maybe some coordination, right? Just handling location coordination. And that will take a lot off your plate, but there's a lot of things that shows your client, right? It shows them that you are operating at a certain level, and maybe you don't use that producer for everything else. Maybe you produce all the other stuff, but they just handle the location, the permits, that type of stuff. So try to think of different ways of bringing in, help, if you will, at different levels. And then when you start to get bigger jobs, you can increase that as well. So that way you're not just paying somebody a big day rate to do, on a small job. Ask them, but you can't ask them unless you have that relationship. So I think start now, start building those relationships now with those folks in the industry. And as you get jobs, talk to them about that, right? Like, I had this job, it's super small, but are you willing, or would you entertain the idea of helping me do this one part? And what would you charge for this based on the budget? Or based on, could you just do this one piece of coordination for this amount, right? Maybe that's only required to do 2 days worth of work versus the whole entirety of the project. So look at different ways of diversifying your use of production and crew and talent. So I think that's start now. Don't eat. COVID's happening. Everything's going down, but build relationships now. Get in there right now.
Well, to tell you the truth, I mean, I could go online or local areas, and I could find a shooter, I could find an editor or a MoGraph artist, but I wouldn't know the first thing about where to find a producer in this area, somebody who isn't already doing what I do.
Julian, how can we search for producers?
The other thing to think about also is kind of what I touched on a little bit earlier, was that sometimes you might find a graphic artist that might have the capabilities of a producer. And I think if you think in that term, or in those terms, or if you find a couple of producers that you might have, and it might be someone that's doing what you're doing that no longer wants to do everything that you're doing. So maybe they had a business at one point, but now can offer those things for you now without the weight of ownership. But also, I would keep in mind that whatever decision that you make, if you bring someone on, it doesn't have to be, if it turns out that it's not in your best interest in the long term, you can always, you're not obligated to keep that, you keep that person on forever. And you might, I would say, for Tony and I, when I came on board with Tony, it was a big shift. It was bigger than just bringing on a producer to this established company and I'm just filling a role. It was a big shift in how, and I think we touched on it earlier, in how we represent Tony and his services and Tomiga, and then what that means as a company, and how we organize everything and how we're presented to the market. So it's a big step in terms of what you feel your company is and how it's viewed. But we started off on a very tentative basis. Like it was, it was like, we talked about the position and we talked about what we were looking for, both of us together, and it wasn't very definitive. Like there were so many ways that you're like, well, I'm not sure. Well, how long do you think you'll need somebody? I don't know. Like so you don't have to have all the answers, and your selection process doesn't have to be, oh, well, I hired this person. It's got to be for a year. It's got to be 2 years or whatever. It doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. For Tony and I, it was like a couple months, and we said, well, we'll play it by ear and we'll see how it goes. And so that's how it started. And then once you start working with someone, you get a sense of how that relationship is going to be, how beneficial it is. I mean, you can decide how long that's going to take or how much of a commitment you're willing to provide. And so again, it goes back to what your business model is. Do you have any kind of if you do some forecasting, where might you think you would be able to support that, even if it's for a short amount of time? And then, because what you can't always add to the equation is what that person brings to the table. So maybe you have a situation where you might not be able to afford them. But if you have someone that you bring on board that has a couple of clients and you do lean on them a little bit for sales, how does that impact your company then?
Yeah.
So that's the other thing to think about. Again, not everything works out. And kind of, I think, I can't really speak to it too much because I've never really been in what I call the real world. But you have all these people get hired on these trial bases, and after that trial basis, they either stay on or they don't. And so Tony and I kind of formally, informally, kind of had that fluid, like, well, let's see, I'm not sure how that's going to work out, and it worked out. I mean, I think it was a unique situation. I had a trip planned already before he and I started working together. So I worked with Tony for a few weeks, and then I went out of town for a week or so, and then came back. And I think Tony felt a little bit, and it was a little bit more evident of the things that I was able to contribute to the company, and I felt like it was almost like a test.
It's such a huge investment, and
time
it's
and
so
money,
scary to have to bring somebody on that you have to now fulfill financial obligations, all these different things that you have to do. It's very scary. And even like Julian was saying, even on the hiring day was kind of like, I don't know. I knew I needed somebody, and I knew that I could afford them at that time. I wasn't sure if I could afford them. I mean, I had projected work coming in, and I knew that work was coming in. It wasn't like we didn't know, but it's scary. And you're putting down money, all these things. You have to feed a family, a whole other family now. It's your responsibility. But all the little things that came from Julian being on board that I didn't realize, all the little, yes, he handled paperwork and management, but again, you start to be seen from the outside in as a machine, an operation, not just me doing everything. Right now, there's process that can actually be in place, and there's things that can happen that can be scheduled, and all these things add up, and your clients see that, and they notice that, and they start to pick up on those little tidbits, and it gives them confidence. It helps them to know that it's not just Tony, and can Tony handle this workload? It's Tomiga, right? Now Tomiga is, like Julian was saying, now there's services. It's not like, well, can Tony edit that? It's not about that. It's not about me anymore. It's about, now it's Tomiga. And it doesn't matter if Tony can edit or not. We will bring somebody in accordingly based on how many jobs are happening. So all those little things add up. And like Julian said, when he left, it became super evident. When he came back, I said, you can never leave or go anywhere else. You are here permanently. But like he was saying, I was ready at that moment to bring somebody on full time. But there's plenty of opportunities to bring somebody on for project basis, or just even a part of a project, not necessarily the whole project, or a temporary amount of time. Can we work on this for a month or two, whatever. So it's not like you have to either do this or either do that. I think there's a lot of different opportunities in between that can come through just having conversations.
Now, Daniel, how long ago have you hired your producer, and what has been the impact so far on your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So it actually started the week 2 weeks before COVID, before we went down on quarantine. So like that, talk about like perfect timing. But going right off the bat of like what Tony said, and this is for anybody listening, it's like just do it by trial. Like if you think your project's going to last a couple weeks, then just work with that person for a couple weeks. And if you know that it's not going to work out, let them finish up, and then you find somebody else. There's plenty of places to post ads to find producers. Obviously within your network of like, hey, I've heard that Bob out there, he's a producer. Let me just reach out to him, have a coffee with him, and see what the relationship dynamic is like. And then from there, it's like, hey, I have a project coming up. I would really, love some help. Is this something you might be interested in? And then you start interviewing them the same way you would interview a client to see how they are. Interview somebody who's you potentially start working with, and start at that basic level of just freelancing for as long as you can. And a lot of the team here is like a permanent freelance, because we always have projects coming in the door versus like, oh, hey, well, cool, and then we'll see you in 6 months. And that sometimes there is that. But when did we bring somebody on? I was actually traveling the week that we came out. So the first week that she actually started, I wasn't even in the office. So we were having phone calls, and our team lead, Kyle, we were working on a title sequence. And so I'd be like, hey, here's everything that I think is going to go. Here's the layout. Here's the creative direction. Here's the mood boards. Run with this vision. Cool. And then I'll check in at the end of the day or the beginning of the day. Hey, just making sure everybody's good. What problems are we having, etc. Hey, there's a question here. Can you call the client? So I'm calling the client to make sure, hey, they're asking this question. What do you think? Okay, cool. And then relay that information back. So what has our producer been able to do? She's been able to also just help push me a little bit and challenge me a little bit more to realize I don't have to do everything. So sending emails, cold emails. Hey, let's put up a list on the wall. These are the people that we want to work with this year. And then COVID happened. And it's still there, the vision board, right? What do we want to do? How do we get to that point? Let's say we want to work for a top tier agency, or this awesome artist has a music video. Let's start doing the research and figure out who handles their stuff. Do they have somebody? Look, and doing a lot of research. And then also just bringing the dynamics of somebody else like that in the office. And I would say like it's been beneficial, 100% over it, just to push us and challenge ourselves to be better than where we were, and to have somebody that can be in on the calls and to also help throw ideas and decisions off of. I think the thing, real quick, going back to one of the other questions, is like, how do you raise your rates a little bit? Well, just by bringing on that other person. Again, going back to the branding, it's not Daniel, it's White Rhino. There's other people here, there's other things. So I might not edit it, I might even just hand it off 100% and just be the creative direction, quality control, so to say. So you're able to multiply yourself faster. So because you're already at that level of, I got one other person, two other people, you're already going to charge a higher rate. So your client already understands, oh, I'm going to bring on a video person, an editor, and a producer to quality control, manage things, or organize things, versus, hi, I'm Bob, I do all this stuff, because they already know you're coming from that disadvantage that they might get you at a lower rate because you do it all, versus, hey, we do have an infrastructure. Hey, we have a pipeline, and trusting that, that sends the message to the client that you're already at that stage.
Cool. I guess we have been talking here for an hour, 40 minutes already. And I think it would be interesting to start wrapping up. And of course, it's impossible to ignore COVID. And want it or not, I think most people are impacted by everything stopping. And we have here also different levels of businesses. Wanted to hear from Tony, from Julian, from Daniel, from Gabriel as well. What would be the tips that you would give people and other businesses how to handle this current situation? Let's say your clients are not calling you anymore to get any jobs, and but you need to make money. You have those employees, or you have to pay your own bills. What would be your tips right now in this COVID situation, Tony?
I'm going to go back to the relationships. By having good client relationships, you can have these conversations, and it won't seem out of the ordinary just to call up and say, hey, we normally have these conversations. We normally have coffee time. We normally have a time where we get together, and you could, then the approach is different versus just you're just calling up this client that you haven't talked to in who knows how long, and you're like, hey, does any work? I know COVID's bad, but they're going through their own problems. So having good relationships, you have a sense of FaceTime with them, but you can carry conversations from previous talks and meetups, and that just makes it easier to say, what are your strategies? What are you guys talking about and thinking? Are you shutting all of your marketing down, or is it important to keep marketing for you guys? So those type of questions can be had much easier, and then they can be pushed to how do we want to, based on the type of company they are and what industry they are in, what message do we want to give out to your customers and to the world about dealing with COVID? So each industry is going to have a stronger or less stronger reason why to market. And that's going to be, each of your clients are going to have a stronger or less, but by having relationships, you can have those conversations much easier. And again, if you're coming from the value sense, like Daniel was talking about earlier, it's more about how can we strategize together, right? How can we build something together that can benefit your company, but your customers, and how can it help push their message forward? Also, it's what type of work are you doing now, and then what are other things out there that's happening? For a while in the past, everybody was talking about vertical video is horrible, and I'm a purist. I'm only going to do widescreen. Well, there's plenty of ads to be done in vertical video on Instagram, on stories. So there's opportunities there, right? Companies want to share and promote themselves. So if you're not looking at what's on the horizon, what are the kids doing? What are the networks are they on? Think about that stuff. So where can you push yourself? Not really cannibalize yourself, but where can you push yourself that you're not going to? That's kind of what I would say that you could do right now. Anybody
Awesome.
else?
Thank you. Julian, what about you?
No, yeah, I think what Tony said is exactly right. You want to continue those relationships that you've had, because once you get to the point where you want to get to a point, I should say, that you're not specifically always just talking about the next project that's coming up, but you're looking to plan for longer term. The other thing that I would say is that all the services that we provide for our clients, we can also provide for ourselves. So you also want to make sure that you don't forget your own marketing. And if you're not super busy with clients, consider yourself a client and look at how you can take this time to invest in yourself, as Tony mentioned, the skills creatively, but also your marketing. How you present yourself, whether it's working on your website, if there's different work that you want to try to get, how can you build those skills, or how can you translate the skills that you currently have into something, a new service that you might be able to provide? So there's always time to invest in your own company and in yourselves, and allow yourself to grow professionally in your skill sets, that once everything starts to come back and get back to normal, if they or however that's going to happen, you'll be more prepared on the back end of that when the time comes.
Cool. And Daniel, any tips and tricks for everyone there navigating this COVID sea of horribleness?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one, like, you're constantly reinventing yourself. It never stops. You never stop learning. You always have to be a student of life. And when things come, you have to know how to pivot, and you need to know how to shift. For us, like, this is the greatest time to be alive. It's the greatest time because although there are horrible things out there that are happening to people, everyone now is on the same level playing field. There's not one company that's better than this. There's not one guy that's got a better camera. It's all level now. And this is the perfect time to rebrand. This is the perfect time to work on your website, to invest in yourself. Like Julian was saying, like, treat yourself as your own client. How would you handle things? How would you go back? Take the old content, re-edit it, rebrand it, recolor it, change the music. That will be something fresh, and put it on a different platform, whether it's an Instagram or YouTube. Vimeo is still there. Change things so that and if you start putting stuff out, even at the very basic level on your IG stories, or start connecting with your clients there, they're seeing that stuff is constantly being churned out. So that gives them the idea that you're staying busy, even if you're just doing it just for yourself. Now more than ever, I feel like clients can't afford not to hire you, because now they need to show videos. Again, everything has gone to social media now. So now they need to show that their restaurant is open and they're following security safety measures, So as a video person, let's go figure out where those clients are. Let's reach out to them and figure that out. For us, we've gone from shooting music videos, being on set, live action, to now getting in the vein of doing animated music videos and doing similar type of work. But now, hey, let's now work with more illustrators and animators versus, hey, we're going to go shoot this, we're going to do this, because they still need content being pushed out. Now we're just now doing it from a different perspective. So for us, like, we've had projects, we've been busy, and even still, like, now, because we've had the film background, all the directors and producers that were working on client work are now like, oh, hey, I had this project that I was working on a year ago or 6 months ago, and I had to put it on the shelf because I got busy. Now they're not busy, and so now they have the time to actually start finishing some of those things. So for us, like, there hasn't been a huge drop off from work, but at the same time, we're still getting emails every week for new projects. And everybody's just waiting for the COVID to lift, because we got maybe 6 to 10 different things that are ready to just go shoot as soon as it's ready. But for us, rebrand, reinvent yourself, get out and do things, right? Get out of the house and just go to the office. Stay in that routine of designing and creating things, and even take a break and figure out, where do you want to be? Where do you see your position as your brand, is your business? Where do you want to be in 3 months, in 6 months? And again, like, if it's one of those things like, hey, we don't know how we're going to keep the lights on next month, that's a different conversation to have. But if you're like, hey, we'll be okay for a little while, what are we going to do with the time to do it? So learn, grow, reach out to people and connect. And that's been something that's been very helpful to us, is connect on social media. And we've been able to, book a plane ticket and fly across the country and meet some of these people we've been chatting with and just have coffee and just chat. So COVID, very serious. And at the same time, it's also it's the leveling field. So there's no excuse not to come out ahead at the end of all this.
All right. And Gabriel, what do you think are our next steps as business owners that have been quite affected by this? What are the things that you're doing right after you finish this call?
Well, I agree with Julian and Daniel. I mean, I did see a major drop-off. I went into 2020 with more projects lined up than any year before, and they all disappeared when the virus hit. And it would be very easy for me to sit here and wallow that I don't think I've had a job for 45 days, but I am completely using this time to rebrand my company, to jump into conversations like this, to create content, to market my business, to think about new ways of doing things, and specifically what Julian said about applying what we do for our clients to ourselves. So, I mean, if our videos solve problems, well, then I just need to put that magnifying glass on myself and my own company. I mean, I have a problem. What is that problem? Well, there are no clients right now. Why aren't there clients? Well, there's this COVID-19. And you kind of work your way backwards. So if you can't do that for your clients, then you can't do it for yourself. So this is a really good test for me. And it's also a good opportunity when things are slow to build all this stuff up, so that once the world starts to open up safely a little bit, I'm ready to pounce on those new opportunities.
Excellent. So, Tony, where can people find you on the internet? Oh, you want to say something more? Okay, go ahead.
I do. Just to piggyback off of everybody else, if it's all right. If you have pre-existing clients that you have a relationship with, you have past work with, like for us, for certain clients, we have basically like a media library of content that's still all usable, so see what you can go back and reuse to create new post jobs, maybe it's an ad or it's new content for their website. So see what's reusable. Maybe there's stuff that wasn't used for certain jobs or productions that you can now use for new post-only work. So that's another opportunity. Another thing is, as the other guys were saying, as investment, start planning now to how are you going to bring production back in COVID, right? We will get back. Production will get back. Everything's going to happen, but it's not going to be the same. It's going to be different. So what are the policies and what are corporations looking to make sure, what assurances can you give them that you're following and keeping safe practices? So build that now, build those policies and procedures. Now look to the AICP websites and the DGA websites of how to do contactless environments and also how to scale your productions with COVID in mind and what PPE needs to happen, because that's just another measure of security and safety that your client is going to want to have as a reassurance. So don't wait to develop that once you get a job. Do that now. Think about it, because there's a whole time and process that has to happen of cleaning equipment and how are you going to pass things off between departments, between talent, and so forth. So build that now so that you're ready to go and you have something in place. So if a corporation or a corporate client does reach out to you, you can say, yes, at this level, this is how we can approach this job and we can do it now. So just be ready because it's coming back.
And how can people reach out to you and Tomiga online and otherwise?
I'm usually going crazy on Twitter. That's at Tomiga2 on Twitter. And on Instagram, we are Tomiga Works, at Tomiga Works on Instagram. And our website is tomigaworks.com.
Julian, how can people find you online?
Well, the same way you can find Tony. I mean, we share those accounts, and so.
All right, and Daniel.
Yeah, you can connect on Instagram D_Saldivar D or underscore, and then also just at White Rhino VFX and whiterhinofx.com. But Instagram is where we're at the most, and then website is very much a portfolio piece. All
right, and Gabriel, how can people find you?
Yeah, I'm not much on social media with my company, which is something I'm working on this year. But I am on Twitter at ace_enterprises. And then you could also contact me through my website, gabriel@aceenterprises.com.
Perfect. That was our panel for today. Guys, thank you very much for this conversation. At least for me, it has been extremely helpful to see so many different perspectives, so many different levels of experience. And really, I think this is going to be very helpful for a lot of people out there as well that are going through these very hard moments. And I wish everyone the absolutely best. And that's it. Thank you very much for being part of this panel again. And for the audience, thank you for tuning in, sending messages. And of course, you heard all of their Twitter handles. If you have any questions, just drop them in the comments. And we're going to try to answer them as much as possible later on. And that's it. Hope I see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.